But when you start reviewing the coverage that you get for that $150, $200 a year, you think, just a second here, there's not a whole lot of meat on the bones here.
Welcome to the Thrive with Technology podcast. I'm Curt Dueck, and I've spent the last few decades helping businesses leverage their technology. Our goal here is to discuss where technology intersects with business and leave you with some new information to move forward.
Cyber insurance is something we've all heard about. But what is it and what do we need to know? I'd like to introduce my guest today, David Schmidt from Rempel Insurance. Hey, David, tell me a little bit about your experience.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is kind of fun to be part of a podcast, and not just a podcast, a video cast. I've been an insurance broker for 13 years and 1 day. So 13 years ago yesterday, I was hired into this business and I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. And here we are 13 years later. Some would say the same thing, that nothing has changed. But I have learned a whole lot of lessons and I've met a lot of great people in the last 13 years. And as geeky as it sounds, I love what I do. I get to work with businesses and with farms and to give them advice to hopefully help make them the most successful that they can be.
That's perfect. I think the understanding that the more we know, the less we know is something that I've really learned as I've gotten further on in my career.
Yep.
So I just want to set up the foundation of the conversation. Like, let's define cyber liability insurance and who's the type of organization that would need it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A couple of years ago, I think I would have been one of the people that would have said, I don't really know if there's really a need for it with a lot of the small businesses that we would see specifically in rural Manitoba, rural Saskatchewan that we would deal with. But the last couple of years, lots of things have changed in the world, specifically with the presence of the online exposure and the risks that are associated with that. And I've seen it firsthand with clients of ours where one after another, we started getting phone calls saying, hey, do I have insurance? Something just happened. And I'm curious to know if there's insurance for this. And so that has, kind of just by getting our feet wet in those situations and figuring this out, led me to realize that, yes, there is an exposure that we need to educate our clients on and also need to make sure that as businesses, we are protecting ourselves and understanding the insurance options and also the options to transfer that risk without insurance.
Absolutely, and that kind of picks it up like that. With that level of insurance or that like that cyber insurance, what are you primarily covering? Like, what's an organization kind of primarily looking to cover off? Because it's not going to be like fire is easy, right? Like if I have fire insurance, when the building burns down, you're going to come in and help me make myself whole. But with cyber, it's a little more ambiguous. Like is it like the ransom, or is it like what's kind of the role of that insurance coverage?
Yeah, very good question. One of the things that we see from a lot of our mainline property casualty insurers in the market is that 5-6 years ago they all rolled out cyber insurance and they were saying, this is the next great thing that everybody needs. It'll cost you $150 to $200 a year, and it's a bolt-on onto your commercial policy. So yes, of course you need to buy the cyber insurance, but when you start reviewing the coverage that you get for that $150, $200 a year, you think, just a second here, there's not a whole lot of meat on the bones here. A big part of that focus is on the privacy liability side of things. So if I, as a business owner, have confidential data or data on my clients, whether that's financial details, health records, any kind of personal identifiable information, and I lose that information or it gets leaked, I, as a business owner, may be held liable for that. Well, that was the big push 5-6 years ago that everybody needs to have coverage for that. I don't see that being the largest exposure that many businesses have. Now, I guess I can also quickly back up and say there are certain businesses that's definitely a big exposure. If you're running a medical clinic, if you're running an insurance brokerage where we have all sorts of information on people, that's a big part of the exposure. But if you're a retail business or something where you might have a customer's address, their phone number at most on file, that's probably not your biggest exposure. The thing that we're seeing is the cyber crime element. It's the ransomware, the funds transfer, the money goes missing out of my bank account, my email got hacked, somebody clicked on the wrong link, and now I can't get into my system. The cyber crime piece is the part that I feel is the most valuable part for businesses to buy insurance for, and it's also the scariest one it happens to you as well.
Well, Yeah, I've thankfully never had to deal with it on a firsthand basis, but because the industry, and I've helped a lot of other, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've helped quite a few other organizations work their way through the technical side of this. And, even from a third party, like, as the guy coming in to help, it's not a fun experience, right?
No,
So, and that totally helps me kind of picture out what you're trying to do to make whole. So it's kind of the security, the privacy side, as well as, helping organizations get back to running if everything's whatever encrypted or whatever damaged in some way.
yep.
Um, in that, I've read some reports, as well as some of my own experience getting the coverage, that's getting more complicated and more expensive, like every year. Like my insurance went up dramatically last year, over the last 2 years. Is that normal, or is that just like my line of business? What are you seeing?
We are currently still in a hard market in commercial insurance in Canada, but cyber insurance seems to be its own can of worms right now, where uh, the frequency and severity of claims, from one of the reports I was reading recently, is that actually some of the severity of the claims is starting to stabilize, but the frequency is not. It's happening more and more and more. I think maybe it's just that some of the cyber criminals are realizing that there's a max to the amount that they can start asking for. So they're saying, okay, let's cap our demands at this, and let's just go after 5 or 10 more businesses per day so that we can still get to the numbers that we're trying to achieve from a criminal perspective. So the applications, you're very right, are becoming way more of a nightmare to complete as far as qualifying for the coverage. And on the and when you do, congratulations, you do qualify for coverage. Still, by the way, your bill is going up now too. So it's almost the double whammy where you really have to work to continue to be insured from a cyber perspective. But there's still, probably because that risk is growing, a lot of value in buying the cyber insurance.
So are there things that organizations, like, are you telling organizations like they should be doing some things like in preparation to help them be more insurable, or is it just kind of that questionnaire and just making sure you can say yes to as much of that as you can?
That's a great question. And I will put up this disclaimer that I have not been paid by Curt to answer this in the way that I'm about to. One of the things that I'm telling our clients right now is, rather than completing an application incompletely or poorly and having your cyber insurance premiums skyrocket because of that, it's a good investment strategy to say, let's spend more money on the IT security to make sure that our T's are crossed, our I's are dotted, so that when we go and complete that application, we're putting our business in the best possible light, because we're finding that's when we're seeing the smallest amount of rate increases and the coverage being the broadest that's still available. So, like I mentioned, Curt didn't pay me to say this, but I've been telling this to clients. This, rather than spending an extra $10,000 on cyber insurance rate increase, maybe you need to invest 8,000 of that towards beefing up your security, so that when we send in that application, it looks that much better to the underwriters.
Well, and that totally makes sense to me. I know, like, even for myself, when we went through it, we were like, all right, how many of these can I say yes to today, and how many of them will I be able to say yes to before this is like done? Or, I know some of them I've done even give me the opportunity to say, like, give explanation that this is in progress or something like that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yep, definitely. Yeah. Painting a picture for the underwriter that you guys are actually actively involved in managing your security risks, rather than saying, I have no clue, we'll look into that, doesn't really look great on an application.
Is there, if I kind of flip the page a little bit and talk about like those who are covered. Um, I've read a couple articles, primarily in the United States, which is a little bit further ahead on us than us, from what I understand, in the insurance market, like for cyber insurance. But I've read a handful of claims, news articles claiming that claims are denied for like a lack of due care, or things like missing a reporting time, not reporting it in a timely fashion. Is that like, is that just hyperbolic, or is that something that somebody should be worried about?
That is a very good question. One of the trends that we're seeing in the cyber insurance world is that we're seeing more and more insurers now realizing they can't just be insurance companies, they also have to have a very strong understanding of security and loss prevention, but also having teams being able to respond. And so one of the things that we are doing when we are talking with clients about cyber insurance is actually active cyber insurance companies where they are actually actively scanning your domains, your IT infrastructure to make sure that things are on the up and up. And quite often they are proactively sending us responses or replies saying, hey, there's things within your client's presence, their electronic presence that are potentially prone to a claim. And so it's interesting because I would say from that perspective, the insurers are actually actively trying to work to stop those, kind of fill in some of those gaps already as well.
That's interesting. So so you're saying you're seeing some of the like some of the providers being less about like the self-attestation, like, that application document, but also requiring some level of compliance along the way.
Definitely. Yep.
That's
So it's not uncommon for us to get emails saying, hey, you need to check in with this client because there is, something that we picked up in our system, and it'd be good for us to just get an update on what they're doing to prevent this or to mitigate this risk.
So that kind of goes right back to the application process, making sure that you have some level of control or your hands around that security for your company, just because, well, just like every other mode of insurance, you're not wanting to use it, right, as much as possible.
No, definitely not. No.
So if somebody's like, they've been thinking about it, they watch this, and they'd like to investigate, like, I don't have insurance. I'd like to know, like, is every provider the same? Like, does it matter who I'm choosing as a provider?
I would say cyber insurance more than ever, more than pretty much any other line of insurance that we deal with. There is such a variation and such a difference between A to Z. Like I mentioned, you can go to the full-blown active insurance where your cyber insurance company is also providing some of the security updates and some of that stuff. You can go to that level, and you can also buy something so basic that I would say it's hardly worth the paper it's written on. And so I would say it is very important for you to, if you don't understand it or if you don't care to understand it, work with somebody that you know that is going to put the attention to detail in as far as being a broker that's going to educate you and make sure that they're giving you good guidance on what you should have for your organization.
So this is not a transactional purchase. This is something that your broker really kind of has to understand. Like, if me as a customer, I'm not going to completely read the policy and completely understand everything, leaning on a broker who really understands the T's and C's of that agreement. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that there are days where I wish that some of these things were a little bit more transactional, because that takes me back to the good old days where some of these things were actually kind of easy to put in place. You fill out your 8 questions, you put your name on top, and you sign the bottom, you're good to go. And it's not quite that easy right now. So it almost makes me long for those days again, Curt.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons that I was excited to have you to come and talk with me today, because I agree with you. Like, I've seen, just from the organizations I've spoken to, I think sometimes I just get the feeling not every broker is the same with their level of understanding of what's happening in the industry and what's happening and with this level of coverage. So if somebody wants to, they're not sure and they'd like to talk with you and just get some help, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, good question, Curt. We are Rempel Insurance brokers based in Morris, Manitoba. So we are a bit of a strange fit in the insurance industry, where we are a one location insurance brokerage, family owned and based out of Morris, Manitoba. So if you're driving through on Highway 75, our doors are open. We also have this thing called technology, where we've got phone lines and emails and a number that you can text our office at and all sorts of things like that. So we're pretty easy to find. Rempelinsurance.com is the website, and you can find all of that information there.
Perfect. Thanks again, David. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Curt.